We're embarking on a deep dive into the life of a figure whose story feels like it spans millennia, but ended, well, so tragically in the 20th century. Haile Selassie I, Emperor of Ethiopia.
It's just a remarkable study in duality, isn't it? I mean,
Right.
here you have a monarch claiming a divine right to rule, the 334th in a line supposedly going all the way back to King Solomon.
Right, this ancient, almost mythical lineage.
And yet he was simultaneously obsessed with rapid modernization, with global diplomacy, and, the rule of law.
That tension, that's exactly what we're dissecting today, the ancient king of kings versus the aggressive modernizer. For you, our listener, we've pulled key insights from his own speeches, from historical records, and from people who actually served him.
And our mission really is to get to the heart of how he balanced all that, how he balanced tradition with this unprecedented change.
And how he became this champion of collective security on the world stage, only to see his absolute power just collapse in a revolution fueled by famine.
It's the ultimate cautionary tale of ambition, I think, and context. So let's start at the beginning, his origin story.
He was born Rastafari Makonnen.
Right, in Harar, back in 1892. His lineage was rooted in both the Amhara Solomonic tradition and Oromo Silte ancestry, which politically gave him this incredibly deep legitimacy.
What's so fascinating to me, though, is that despite that ancient background, his youth was completely steeped in these forward-looking modern ideas.
Absolutely. This wasn't just about learning court ritual. He had a foundational modern education. He was tutored by an Ethiopian Catholic priest, a man named Abba Samuel Woldekahin, who gave him, his moral and religious compass.
But then there's the other side of it.
Yes, and this is maybe more telling. He learned conversational French from a French physician, Dr. Vitalian, just in his spare time.
And French was the language of international diplomacy then. So this gave him a direct window into European thought and into politics. He could bypass all the traditional court interpreters.
It sets the stage perfectly, doesn't it? For a man who truly believed Ethiopia could and should play on the global stage, this blend of deep tradition and early Western learning, it gave him this unique perspective to even attempt what he did.
Which was moving Ethiopia from, a feudal state into the 20th century.
And doing it without sacrificing its sovereignty, that was the goal.
Okay, let's unpack this modernization drive. Because as soon as he becomes crown prince and regent in 1916, he doesn't waste any time. His focus seems to be on creating this loyal, educated technocracy.
He saw it clearly. The old system, based on local feudal lords, it just couldn't run a modern state. So his first, most crucial policy was education.
He was sending the best and brightest abroad.
He was. He personally oversaw the selection of talented young students. He called them the intelligentsia and sent them off to top European universities.
And the key is they were accountable to him, not to the church, not to the old regional nobles. So this was modernization as a tool for political centralization.
That is the key insight, exactly. And at home, he was setting up modern ministries, schools like the Teferi Makonnen School. He understood that to get legitimacy in the West, you had to show progress.
So he brought in international experts.
For everything, infrastructure, health.
Like the Bethsaida Hospital. It sounds functional, but for that time, building that hospital, bringing in Swedish doctors, and installing the nation's first X-ray machine, that was a monumental statement.
Oh, absolutely. It showed he valued Western science over traditional superstition, and his diplomatic moves were just as swift. By 1923, he gets Ethiopia into the League of Nations.
The first independent African country to join, he was signaling, we are sovereign and we expect your respect.
And the next major step was internal, redefining power itself. In 1931, he does something almost unthinkable for an absolute monarch.
He voluntarily enacts a constitution.
It's fascinating, the political tightrope he was walking there. It was a radical departure from the system of his ancestors. It set up a judicial system, it formalized government, and he even said publicly that the law was supreme, that it would stop the strong from overpowering the weak.
Okay, but was it a genuine move toward sharing power? Or was it brilliant political theater to actually consolidate his power?
The sources really suggest the latter. I mean, it established a framework, yes, but he retained near absolute power. By formalizing the bureaucracy through law, he made officials answerable to the Constitution.
Which was really just answerable to him.
Precisely. It completely undercut the power of the old feudal lords, the Raises, who had always held the real local power. He modernized his own autocracy.
That's a very sharp way to put it. He used the language of modernity to strengthen an ancient position. But that ambition, that control, It ran headlong into the threat of European fascism.
In 1935, the shadows arrive. Benito Mussolini's Italy. And Mussolini wasn't just driven by empire. He wanted to avenge Italy's humiliating defeat at Adwa in 1896.
So this was about restoring Italian pride.
And consolidating their colonies, yes. And despite Ethiopia being a sovereign member of the League of Nations, that idea of collective security, it proved to be utterly meaningless.
It was just exposed as a cynical charade.
And the most egregious example has to be the Hoare-Laval Pact. This was a secret deal between Britain and France to basically just give Italy 2/3 of Ethiopia to end the conflict.
It's just a stunning betrayal. It proved that Western powers cared more about appeasement and self-interest than the rule of law or the fate of a sovereign African nation.
But that betrayal transformed Selassie. He went from being this beleaguered regional monarch into an international icon of resistance, and that all culminates in his 1936 speech in Geneva.
Before the League of Nations, this is the moment he cements his legacy as a global statesman.
He travels there after Italy has brazenly used chemical weapons mustard gas on his soldiers and civilians, and you have to picture it. This small, dignified man, dressed in black, standing before a hall of nations that had already decided to abandon him.
He delivered the address in Amharic, describing the atrocities, and he called the chemical warfare a refinement of barbarism.
And he didn't just appeal for help. He delivered this powerful, prophetic warning. He said that the League's failure to protect Ethiopia would lead directly to the collapse of world order and engulf Europe in disaster.
He basically said the world had to choose between justice and international anarchy.
And that warning came true. Within 3 years, World War II started. It's hard to imagine a clearer validation of his foresight. He was forced into exile in Britain, but he never lost faith in that idea of international justice.
And he was vindicated.
He was. He waited, and in 1941 he returned, rallying forces with the British to defeat the Italians and reclaim his capital. That whole trauma, the betrayal, and then the vindication, it shaped his entire post-war foreign policy.
So even after the League completely failed him, he still believed in collective security. That's dedication.
It wasn't blind faith. It was a commitment to an ideal. He saw the new United Nations as the successor, the only way small nations could survive, and he backed it up with action. He sent Ethiopian troops to UN peacekeeping missions, most famously during the Congo crisis.
And this dedication to a bigger mission is what made him, maybe, the foremost architect of African diplomacy of his generation, the crowning achievement being the Organization of African Unity, the OAU.
In 1963, headquartered in his own capital, Addis Ababa.
And what's fascinating is how he positioned Africa. In his big 1963 address, he said unity was the goal, but he cautioned against mirroring that old 19th century nationalism that had torn Europe apart.
He wanted something different, a different kind of brotherhood, not just a loose alliance of new flags, but a genuine single African brotherhood.
And he was practical about it. This wasn't just lofty ideals.
Not at all. He outlined extremely practical steps. Economically, he called for a specialized body for coordination, for increasing trade between African nations. The idea was that each nation should focus on what its resources were best suited for.
He also understood that colonialism had built-in roadblocks to unity. He pointed to the terrible travel and communication links, these anachronisms that kept Africans isolated from each other.
And central to his whole long-term vision was education, culture. He pushed for an African university, sponsored by all member states, to train future leaders in an atmosphere of continental brotherhood. Ethiopia even offered the site and a ton of money right away.
And he had this personal, charming touch to his diplomacy, too. He was famous for using Ethiopian airlines to fly directly into conflict zones to mediate. And of course, there's the story of his chihuahua, Lulu.
Lulu, yes. It's such a delightful detail, but it gives you a sense of the man. He'd bring Lulu on these sensitive diplomatic trips, and apparently he'd let the little dog just run around during these high-stakes meetings.
As an icebreaker.
A completely disarming quirk. It would relax these tense heads of state just for a moment and help build trust. It worked when he was mediating the conflict between Morocco and Algeria, which was right on the brink of war.
So we have this incredible figure, an absolute monarch who's also this tireless international diplomat, a symbol of anti-colonial resistance, the guiding light for African unity. And yet, internally, the structure supporting him was rotting.
That is the ultimate irony, isn't it? He was this colossal figure abroad, while the ground was literally shifting beneath his feet at home. The first big fracture was the 1960 coup attempt.
Right, and even though that coup was crushed pretty quickly, partly because the Ethiopian Orthodox Church denounced the plotters, it was a pivotal moment. Why was it so important?
Because it revealed that the emperor's divine right was no longer unquestioned. The plotters, they were highly educated. They tapped into this immense popular resentment against the feudal system and promised a real democracy.
And even though they failed,
The fact that it happened, that Ethiopians, especially students and the educated classes, had witnessed this challenge, it meant the king's power to rule without consent had been permanently questioned.
and his modernization efforts, the Koka Dam, the Assab port, they were real achievements. But what was the actual impact for most Ethiopians?
Well, that was the problem. A widening economic chasm. These huge infrastructure projects mainly benefited the capital and the modern elite. The vast majority of people were still agrarian, dependent on cash crops like coffee, and ruled by feudal lords who charged these crippling rents.
So the progress was incredibly uneven. It created this huge disparity. And Selassie was aware of this intellectual disconnect.
He was. Sources say he was frustrated. He'd sometimes observed this scorn for manual labor among the educated youth he had created. He'd educated them for high office, not for the hard development work the nation actually needed.
And that failure to translate modernization into widespread prosperity just set the stage for disaster.
And the disaster arrived in 1973 with the famine. And this wasn't a sudden shock.
No, not at all.
And this is the most damning failure of his regime. The Ministry of Agriculture had produced a detailed report warning 6 months in advance of the coming famine in the Wollo and Tigray regions.
But the government suppressed it.
Completely suppressed it. They chose to prioritize the image of Ethiopia as a stable, modern state, the proud host of the OAU. They prioritized foreign perception over the lives of their own people.
Jack, silly.
Staggering. It is. The calculated effort to hide the truth led to a colossal tragedy. And here's the statistic that became the undeniable proof of their priorities. At the height of the famine in 1973, while hundreds of thousands were starving, Ethiopia exported over 200,000 tons of grain.
The largest export surplus they'd had in years.
Since 1967, they were selling grain abroad while people were dying at home.
And that outrage, combined with inflation and army mutinies, it led directly to the revolution in '74.
It led to the rise of the Provisional Military Administrative Council, the DERG. They presented themselves as the true reformers, capitalizing on all the resentment against the corruption and the failure of this ancient regime to simply feed its people.
And the King of Kings, the descendant of Solomon, was deposed by his own military and kept under guard. His family thrown in prison.
A profoundly undignified terrestrial land, stripped of all his divine and temporal power.
So his reign is just this masterclass in complexity. The reformer who introduces constitutions but stays an autocrat. The international champion betrayed by the world who then fails to protect his own people. The father of African unity who can't feed his nation.
And the divine monarch who meets this tragic end under a military junta. He devoted his life to education, to modernization, yet he often said that knowledge only has value if it's applied properly. To create, not destroy.
He believed education without character was destructive.
He did. He warned that if knowledge is acquired without a moral foundation, the result is destruction and death.
So given that the revolution that deposed him was fueled by the very educated classes he created and led by military council, the DERG, that manipulated information, that suppressed the famine report, fundamentally corrupting the application of knowledge for political gain, what lesson does Haile Selassie's extraordinary life offer you about the moral character required to manage the immense power and complexity of a rapidly modernizing nation? What good is progress if the human application of that progress is corrupted?